Africa was spoken about as a continent of potential rather than power. Analysts described it as the future, investors called it emerging, and global institutions treated it as something to watch from a distance. But quietly, steadily, and now unmistakably, Africa has moved beyond potential. The rise of Africa is no longer theoretical. It is measurable, visible, and already reshaping the global economy. Across the continent, a transformation is underway that few predicted would happen this fast. Africa today is younger, more connected, more urban, and more entrepreneurial than at any point in its history. Over 60% of Africans are under the age of 25, creating the largest youth population on Earth. This demographic reality alone is enough to shift global power, but it is only the beginning of the story. While traditional economic powers wrestle with aging populations, labor shortages, and slowing growth, Africa is expanding. Cities are rising, infrastructure is accelerating, digital adoption is exploding, and global giants like Amazon, Tesla, and Google are no longer watching from the sidelines. They are positioning themselves for what many now recognize as the next major center of global growth. Africa's rise did not happen overnight. It is the result of decades of structural change, painful lessons, and deliberate rebuilding. Many African nations have stabilized their political systems, strengthened institutions, and embraced regional cooperation. The African Continental Free Trade Area, one of the largest free trade zones in the world, is quietly dismantling barriers between 54 countries, creating a single market of over 1.4 billion people. This matters because scale changes everything. A unified African market is larger than Europe and North America combined. For companies like Amazon, this represents an unprecedented logistics and consumer opportunity. For Google, it means billions of new users coming online, many for the first time. For Tesla, it signals a continent rich in critical minerals, renewable energy potential, and future consumers. Technology is one of the clearest indicators of Africa's ascent. Mobile phones transformed African economies long before smartphones dominated the West. Mobile banking systems like M-Pesa redefined finance, allowing millions to leapfrog traditional banking entirely. Today, African fintech companies process billions of dollars in transactions, powering small businesses, cross-border trade, and financial inclusion at scale. Google has taken notice. It has invested heavily in African data centers, startup ecosystems, and digital infrastructure. The company understands that the next billion internet users will not come from Europe or North America, but from Africa. Every search, every app, every digital service represents long-term value, and Africa's digital population is growing faster than anywhere else on Earth. Amazon's interest follows a similar logic. E-commerce in Africa is still in its early stages, but logistics networks are expanding rapidly. Roads, ports, and payment systems are improving. Urban populations are increasing, creating dense consumer hubs. Amazon does not need Africa to be fully mature today. It only needs to be inevitable, and the trajectory is clear. Tesla's attention highlights another critical dimension of Africa's rise: resources and energy. Africa holds some of the world's largest reserves of lithium, cobalt, nickel, manganese, and copper minerals essential for electric vehicles, batteries, and renewable energy systems. As the world transitions away from fossil fuels, these materials become strategic assets. Countries that control them gain leverage. Africa is no longer just a supplier of raw materials. It is positioning itself to control more of the value chain. At the same time, Africa's renewable energy potential is unmatched. Vast solar corridors, wind capacity, hydroelectric power, and geothermal resources give the continent a unique advantage in a carbon-constrained world. While older economies struggle to retrofit aging infrastructure, Africa is building new systems from the ground up, often cleaner, cheaper, and more efficient. Manufacturing is also shifting. Rising labor costs in Asia and supply chain disruptions have forced global companies to rethink where goods are produced. Africa's growing workforce, improving infrastructure, and proximity to European and Middle Eastern markets make it increasingly attractive. Industrial zones are expanding in countries like Ethiopia, Morocco, Egypt, Nigeria, and Rwanda, turning Africa into a serious manufacturing contender. This shift is changing perceptions. Africa is no longer viewed solely as a destination for aid, but as a partner in production, innovation, and consumption. Venture capital flows into African startups have surged over the past decade. Homegrown companies are scaling across borders, solving local problems with global relevance. From agritech to health tech, African innovation is exporting ideas, not just goods. Urbanization is accelerating this momentum. African cities are among the fastest growing in the world. With urban growth comes demand for housing, transportation, energy, healthcare, and education. Entire new markets are forming in real time. For global corporations, these cities represent long-term growth engines. For African governments, they are opportunities to redefine development paths. Education and skills development are also evolving. Millions of young Africans are entering technology, engineering, and creative industries. Remote work and global freelancing platforms have connected African talent directly to international markets. A software developer in Lagos or Nairobi can now work for a company in Silicon Valley or London without leaving home. This changes income flows, skill transfer, and economic resilience. Of course, challenges remain. Infrastructure gaps, governance issues, and inequality still exist. But the difference today is momentum. Africa is not standing still. It is actively shaping its future. Countries are competing to attract investment, improve ease of doing business, and strengthen regional integration. The narrative has shifted from dependency to agency. Global power centers are adjusting accordingly. When Amazon builds logistics capacity, when Google invests in data infrastructure, when Tesla studies mineral supply chains, they are not making charity decisions. They are responding to signals. Africa's rise is no longer optional to acknowledge. It is becoming impossible to ignore. The geopolitical implications are profound. As Africa's economic weight grows, so does its diplomatic influence. African nations are asserting themselves in global forums, negotiating trade terms, and forming strategic partnerships on their own terms. The continent is no longer a passive player in global affairs. It is becoming a swing region whose choices can tip balances. Perhaps the most important aspect of Africa's rise is psychological. A generation of Africans is growing up with confidence, ambition, and global connectivity. They are building companies, telling their own stories, and redefining success beyond old stereotypes. This cultural shift fuels economic change in ways statistics alone cannot capture. History shows that global power does not disappear, it moves. It follows people, productivity, and possibility. In the 21st century, those forces are increasingly concentrated in Africa. The continent's rise will not be uniform, and it will not be without setbacks, but its direction is clear. Amazon, Tesla, and Google are not betting on Africa out of charity or optimism. They are responding to data, demographics, and demand. They see what is coming. The rest of the world is beginning to catch up. Africa's rise is not a prediction, it is already happening. The question now is not whether Africa will shape the future, but how much of the future it will shape and who will be ready when it does. The sleeping giant is no longer asleep, and the world is finally paying attention. Thanks for watching Alert 360 News, where real stories meet real impact. If you want to stay ahead of the headlines, smash that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and join the fastest growing news community on YouTube.